You're looking at three comfrey plants in my yard that were struggling hard just a month ago. I chipped up some branches and threw them around the base of each plant, and a week later they looked completely different. They went from struggling to thriving. I wanted to know why. My first assumption was the obvious one. Mulch holds moisture, so I decided to actually test it. For my test, I used an infrared thermometer and two soil moisture sensors from EcoWitt hooked up to a Wi-Fi gateway, logging data every 5 minutes. I wanted to look at some real numbers instead of just going off a hunch. I've got a small garden bed with two pumpkin plants, one on each end. Day one was used to gather my baseline, no mulch on either plant. I watered both deeply, one full watering can for each, and took hourly readings all day of the soil surface temperature, leaf temperature, and ambient air temperature. On day two, I chopped up the comfrey you see growing in the middle and used it as mulch on plant one, the plant on the right side. I also added a bit more dry mulch on top of that to get a good 2 to 3 inch layer. I left plant two on the left bare. I watered both again and took the same hourly readings. Then I left the moisture sensors running for 5 more days to see how things played out without me intervening. This included a 48-hour stretch where neither plant got any extra water. I got readings every 5 minutes. Now I'll show you my findings. Here's what I found. Plants are pretty good at managing heat on their own. With just a couple exceptions, both the mulched and unmulched pumpkin plants kept their leaf temperatures below the ambient air temperature the whole time. Both days also peaked into the 90s. I'll be the first to admit there's a lot of noise in a test like this. A cloud passing by, shade from our cherry tree, which way the plant's facing morning versus afternoon, and a lot of other confounding variables, but despite the noise, I concluded that mulch doesn't really impact a plant's ability to regulate its own temperature. Then I examined soil surface temperature, and the results are what you might expect. Day 1, no mulch on either plant. Midday temps soared. The highest reading I got was 115 degrees Fahrenheit. Day 2, the unmulched plant hit 110 degrees Fahrenheit at its peak. The mulched plant topped out around 84 degrees. That's a 26-degree swing just from a few inches of wood chips and chopped comfrey. That gap matters a lot. Extreme heat stresses plant roots directly, and I'll revisit this later, but this finding is the most significant one in my test. Then I analyzed the soil moisture, and this is the part that actually changed how I think about mulch. I left the moisture probes in for 5 days. I expected mulch to help the soil really hang on to the moisture. That was my theory behind these tests, but the data told a different story. In the soil test with my pumpkin plants, there was a 48-hour stretch with no additional watering. During that 48-hour window, the mulched plant actually had a soil moisture lower than the unmulched plant. And looking at the timeline, it seems like what mulch does offer is a slight delay in how fast moisture drops, but both plants eventually settled back down to around the same level, that level being between 30 and 35%. Now, I know this soil is rich. I've been building it up for 5 years, so I wanted to check this against something rougher. I ran the same test on some poor exposed clay soil elsewhere in my yard, and surprisingly came up with the same story. The mulched clay stayed maybe 3 to 4 percentage points higher than the unmulched clay, but both curves moved the same direction at close to the same rate. When I compared the two soil types side by side, even though one was rich and one was poor, they both leveled off in the same mid to low 30% range between waterings. If mulch's big advantage was really about locking in water, I'd expect a bigger gap here, especially in soil that's bad at holding water on its own. It wasn't there. Same conclusion both times. This isn't primarily a water story, it's a temperature story. And of course, mulch does more than just temperature regulation. It can act as a barrier against weeds, and over time it will break down, feeding soil life and improving the soil quality. I garden in a hot, dry climate, and this is exactly why Jeff Lawton talks about mulch and shade as the two core moves for growing in the desert. Not because there's some magic sponge holding water in the ground, but because they're both fighting the same enemy, heat. I think this experiment demonstrates that heat can really impact a plant's health, its growth, and the soil life that it depends on for nutrients. I'm documenting this as I go, trying to back it up with real data instead of just what sounds right. So if this was useful, please consider subscribing. Thanks for watching and good luck in your garden.